Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last session of our two-day webinars. I'm Shiwei, so if you come to yesterday's meeting, hopefully you still remember me. So today, my sharing will be about Alibaba Cloud's Relational Database Service, RDS. So let's get on to it. This is a quick outline of my content today. So first of all, I will give you an introduction about RDS, and then we will talk about the benefits of using RDS, followed by the quick demos, and then at last we'll have the Q&A session. So first of all, what is RDS? RDS is the fully managed relational database service offered by Alibaba Cloud. So currently, we support 3 database engines, that's including MySQL, SQL Server, and PostgreSQL. When you subscribe to our RDS, you will come across a concept called RDS Instance. Instance is basically a combination of CPU, memory, DB engine, storage size and type, network type and capacity. So basically, that means you have a wide range of different RDS types to select to address your different business needs. For example, if you have a system that needs to handle high volume of transactions, and then you probably will need high CPU and memory, and in terms of storage, you probably want to select local SSD disk. But if your database is mainly for staging environment or for archive or reporting purpose, and then you might have large storage but less CPU and memory. So that's option. That's a flexibility we can offer you in our service. Now, what I'm showing here is the high-level architecture design for our RDS. So as you can see, our relational database service is actually built on top of physical clusters rather than virtual machines, mainly for performance reasons. And as an end user, you can access RDS via normal database operations, and you can also manage the RDS instance via either our Cloud Console or use our Open API. And also from this diagram, you can see that we offer lots of tools to support high availability, backup, security, monitoring, etc. So now I'd like to talk about why would you use our RDS. I'd like to explain the benefits in terms of 4 aspects: usability, availability, scalability, and security. Now first, usability. In terms of access to RDS, as I mentioned before, you can either use our Cloud Console to do normal RDS operations. For example, instance provisioning, start and stop the instance, create a database, create an account, etc. You can also use Open API to fully automate all the processes. In terms of network, you can connect to RDS either via internet or intranet. Intranet, what I mean is you are actually accessing RDS via Alibaba Cloud's internal network. This is actually the default way and also the recommended way because it's usually better network performance and security if you keep your RDS in an internal network. But on the other hand, if you do use intranet to access RDS, that means you probably need a front-facing service to interact with RDS. Usually, you will use the Elastic Compute Service. In terms of management, it's actually quite simple. So as I mentioned, it's a fully managed relational database. So what does it mean? That means we'll take care all the work about hosting environment, including the physical infrastructure as well as operating systems. So all you have to do is just look after your database. In terms of migration, we offer tools for you to migrate from other database servers to our RDS. And in terms of skill migration, because our RDS is very similar to the native database engines. So whatever knowledge you have existing knowledge or skill set you have regarding to native database, then you probably you can pretty much transfer it to our RDS service. So it's we'll say it's an effortless migration. In terms of deployment, again, it's very simple. It's pretty much just a few clicks on the console. So you will have your RDS running in 10-15 minutes. Compared to if you want to build your own database engine on top of virtual machine, it might take several hours. So it's much easier to use RDS. And also, RDS support a variety, support a lot of tools to do monitoring. For example, you might want to monitor the CPU utilization, storage, memory utilization, etc. And also, you can set alarms on those monitoring items so that you get alert if a critical threshold is hit. Next, I would like to talk about the availability. With our RDS service, we offer 3 instance editions. The first one is called Basic Edition. The Basic Edition, basically, it's a standalone instance, which means there's only one single node in this instance. So obviously, it's cost-effective, but you got a single point of failure. The second tier is called High Availability Edition. With this edition, you get 2 nodes. This one master and one slave, and they actually they work as primary and standby architecture. And the last edition is we call Finance Edition. With Financial Edition compared to High Availability Edition, you get 1 extra node. So you have 3 nodes, 1 master, 2 slave nodes. Because with Finance Edition, you actually need 3 data centers in the same region. So as a result, in Australia region, we currently only have 2 data centers. So we do not have this Finance Edition available. So once we launch our 3rd data center, we'll have this Finance Edition available as soon as possible. Okay. So regarding to the High Availability Edition, as explained, it follows the primary and standby architecture. Once the primary node goes down, the standby node will switch over to become the primary node automatically. So the average switch over time is just a couple of seconds. With this High Availability edition, you can do local disaster recovery. What that means is you can deploy the primary node in one data center, and you can deploy the secondary or standby node in another data center. So as long as these 2 data centers are in the same region. So this can avoid problem in terms of in case one of the data center has outage. We are also trying to support remote disaster recovery as well. It's currently in a beta mode. What it allows to use is instead of have one of the node in another data center but in the same region, it allows you to deploy this node in another region. So this gives you extra certainty as just in case, very unfortunately, the whole region goes down for whatever reason, you still have a copy of data in another region. All right. Now, in terms of data replication between the master node and slave node, we support 2 replication modes. The first one is called asynchronous replication. What it does is your application who's accessing the database only get return when the master database gets updated. So you get a return straight away after the master database gets updated. The slave node will get the update from the master node eventually. So there's this very small time frame that your data in master and slave node are inconsistent. But this gives you a better performance in terms of response time. The second data replication mode is called semi-synchronous replication. This is actually the default mode that is supported by RDS. You have to do a manual switch to if you want to use asynchronous replication. So what this does is your application only gets returned when the master node and slave node gets updated. So, you can guarantee strong consistency between the master node and slave node. Now, why it's called semi? Because in the event of unfortunate, your slave node becomes unavailable for whatever reason, then the master node will actually switch back to asynchronous replication, which means master node will return the result straight away, regardless of slave node. Once the slave node is back to normal, then slave node will get all the updates from master node, and then they resume to this semi-synchronous replication. So for data consistency requirements, we would recommend you to stick to the semi-synchronous replication. But if you do want this extra performance gain, then you can change it to asynchronous replication. Now, regarding to backup, we have provided tools to allow you to do backup automatically. So all you have to do is either use our Cloud Console or use our Open API to specify the frequency of your backup. So our backup support both physical backup and logical backup. When I talk about physical backup, what I mean is we are backing up the actual data. And when you select the logical backup, we are actually backing up the SQL scripts that are updating the data. So with the physical backup, you have a complete set of data. So in the occasion that you do need to roll back to this backup, it's much faster. But the only problem is it's occupy much more space compared to logical backup. But actually, you don't really need to worry about the space, because when you do a backup, the backup files are not stored in RDS. The backup files are actually transferred to our object storage service called OSS. It's basically elastic storage space where you don't have to worry about the capacity, and it does not affect your disk space reserved for RDS. And of course, it's very cost effective. Now, in the case of you do need to recover data from backup, there's two ways you can do it. The most obvious way is you just select one of the backup and then you click restore. This will actually overwrite whatever data that is available on the master node. So it's kind of a little bit dangerous, I would say. So a recommended way would be you create so-called temporary instance. So there's a feature in this RDS allows you to create a new instance with the selected backup. So it gives you a new connection string, and then you can log in, you can do all your verifications, validations, make sure the data has been recovered is the one that you need. And then you make this temporary instance to be your production instance, and then you just release your older production instance. So in that way, it's much safer. Okay. So next, let's talk about scalability. In terms of scalability, we support both vertical scaling and horizontal scaling. In vertical scaling, what we mean is you can upgrade your CPU, memory, your disk space when your workload increases on your RDS. With horizontal scaling, what we mean is you actually can create multiple read-only instances. This is particularly useful in some scenarios that you have a lot of read-only requests, but not so many write requests. For example, in a ticketing system, you probably will get 10 times of queries rather than ticket bookings. So this is a perfect place where you want to use read-only instances. But just be careful. If you do create multiple read-only instances, make sure your application side can do read-write split, and also make sure your application side do load balancing between all the read-only instances, because each of the read-only instance will get their own dedicated connection string. Now, last, let's talk about security. So whenever we refer to a database, obviously security is one or say it's not one of the, but the most important part. So with our RDS provides a 3-level security defense system. So it supports anti-DDoS. So it has anti-DDoS feature built in by default. It has a web application firewall in front of your RDS. So that does some things like SQL injection prevention, brute force attack prevention, things like that. And also, we will ask you to whitelist your IP who need to access this database. So this is called a 3-level security defense system. Now, in terms of access control, as mentioned already in previous slides, we already asked you to whitelist your IP to access the database. Also, you can enable SSL for transmission encryption. Also, we would recommend you to use our transparent database encryption feature. So what this does is basically our key management service will generate a key for you, and this key will encrypt your database at rest. And then the KMS will manage this key for you. So I will give you a quick demo of this TDE feature later on. And as a general best practice, we would recommend you to use the resource access management to define the policies who has what access to the database. Now, I'd like to give you a quick demo. So what you're seeing right now is the RDS console. So let me just double check if I'm logging correctly. It might log me out sometimes. OK, cool. I'm still in. So what you will see is we have this Create Instance button on the top right. So if you click this Create Instance, it goes to the Buy page. So as you can see, the buy page in RDS, there's 2 pricing model. One is called subscription, which means you pay upfront and you get a discount for that. The other way is pay as you go, so you're charged by hourly rate, but you can release it anytime you want. And there's a lot of regions available. Of course, I'm going to choose the Sydney region. And in terms of database engines, actually, we support 4. I didn't realize that. So we have a MySQL, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, and PPAS as well. So in this demo, I'm going to choose MySQL because it's one of my favorite. So in terms of MySQL versions, we support 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7. And as you can see from 5.7. So as you can see from 5.7, you have the basic edition and high availability edition. But I'm going to choose 5.6 because that's the most stable version. And once you choose this 5.6, you can choose single zone deployment or multiple zone deployment. So this is the master slave node, and you can do local disaster recovery. So I'm going to choose the multiple zone deployment. And then next, you have to choose a VPC to host this RDS. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm using subscription, but for demo purpose, obviously, I don't want to pay for a whole year. I do want to switch back to my pay-as-you-go model. So let's do this again. So I have a Sydney region. I have MySQL 5.6, and then multiple zone deployment. And then I'm just going to pick up one of the VPC. And again, you can choose the CPU and the memory combination. So for this demo, I'm just going to choose 1 core and 1 GB. And in terms of the capacity of storage, I would just say 50. So that gives you an estimation of the cost. That's 7.4 cents per hour. So I'm just going to hit buy and tick, pay now. So it says order complete. So I'm expecting getting this instance being listed here in maybe a few minutes or a few seconds. All right. Usually it takes about 2-3 minutes for this for this order to be processed. So you can see the instance, and it takes about like 15 minutes to come into a running status. Okay. Just let me keep refreshing, make sure I'm getting it. Okay, come on. Okay, yes. Now you can see that I have this database in a creating status. So as I said, it probably takes 5-10 minutes to finish all the initialization work and become available. So for this demo purpose, I actually already created the database here. It's already running, so I'm just going to use this one instead. So if I click into this instance, here is some basic information. So you can see it's MySQL 5.6. It's 1 core, 1 gig. Support maximum IOPS to 600 and the maximum number of connections to 300. Now, the first thing you want to do is you want to set up security. Remember, you have to whitelist your IP, which need to access this server. So here, I've created an ECS, the Elastic Compute Server, that is going to access this server, and the IP is 192.168.0.196, and I'm going to put this IP into the whitelisting. Modify. There. That's it. So now I have whitelisted my IP. So in the connection options, you will see that it provides intranet access. So actually, I can enable internet access if I do want remote connection from external server or from my PC. But for now, I will just use my intranet connection. Now, the next thing I will do, I have to set up the account, and also I have to set up the database so that we can test it. So here, in this accounts, you have a button called Create Account and Create Master Account. Now, be very careful with this Create Master Account. Create Master Account gives you more access control, but once you create Master Account, it disables the console. So you can no longer use console to manage the database. You have to manage it from a database client. So at this point, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to create a normal account. So I will say this is DB admin. And I don't have database yet, so I don't have to authorize it. And I'm going to create a password, which I'm not going to tell you the password. Okay. Say yes. Okay, now the DB admin is okay, it's already activated. Now, I'm going to create a database. Again, this is here is a create a database button, and I have to give it a name. I'll say it's a test DB, and I'm going to authorize my account just created before DB admin to have a read and write access. So I'll say yes. Cool. Now let's check the status. Okay, now I got my database ready, and also I got my account ready. Now, to access the database, again, back to security, as I mentioned before, you can enable SSL to encrypt the transmission. By default, it's actually not enabled, but here I already enabled when I was preparing this demo. So what you have to do is you just have to download the certificate, and when you log in, you use a certificate to log in. And remember, once you enable SSL, you can't revert back. So make a decision, and you can't regret for that. And also, if you want to encrypt the data, you can enable this TDE function as well. And again, once you enable it, you can't revert back. So just be very careful. Now, let me test connecting to this database. So first of all, I need to log into my ECS. So here, I just do SSH root to my IP and with my SSH key. Now, as you can see, once I log into my Elastic Compute Server, I already have the database certificate there. So if I need to connect the database, what I will do is MySQL use SSL, specify the path to that key, and the host is the intranet connection endpoint, and the username is dbadmin, and just type enter, and the password is what I specified just now. Now you can see that I'm already in my in the MySQL database. So if I do show databases, so it's currently showing that I have a testDB. So I can do use testDB. Now I'm connected with testDB. Then I can do show tables. And of course, there's no table in this database. I can create table. I can do whatever I want with this database. So this is a very simple demonstration about how you can provision the database. How you can provision the RDS instance. How you can set up the security, set up SSL, set up encryption, and then you use Elastic Compute Service to connect it to the database. So hopefully that's not too complicated. All right, now let's go back to the Q&A session.
Thanks, Shiwei. Appreciate you giving us that update. That's great. Okay, so let's move to Q&A. Again, thanks for sending in your questions. Got a few here to ask Shiwei. So I'll start by this first question, which is, apart from the common database you're offering, any special database you can offer to handle large volumes of data, such as AWS Aurora?
Okay. Yes, so we have another product called PolarDB. So it's not made available to Australian region yet, but I think it will be available in the next 2-3 months. It's very similar. So the design concept is very similar to AuroraDB. We have another database service called Petadata. So this is designed to handle large volume of transactions. So actually, in our Double 11 Shopping Festival, we use Petadata to handle all the transactions and orders. So it can support hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. So with Petadata, the design principle is very different from PolarDB or Aurora. So it's used a horizontal sharding technique. So basically, your data stored in the database are distributed evenly to different instances according to the sharding key. And while your application level do not have to aware of this, they still access this distributed database as a normal database. But in terms of performance, it's linear scaling, it's load balancing, it's auto scaling. It's basically much more powerful than any single instance database.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question here about Oracle. So do we offer Oracle database?
Unfortunately, at this moment, we do not offer Oracle database. So if you do want to migrate Oracle to Alibaba Cloud, you have to use our bare metal and buy your own license for Oracle. However, there is the database engine is more or less similar to Oracle. I would say 85% similar to Oracle. It's called Postgres SQL. So that's probably the most close version to Oracle.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. Another question here. You said RDS is working on bare metal server, not a virtual server. Does this architecture provide any advantage, i.e. performance?
Yes. So, when you apply virtualization on a physical machine, you always sacrifice a small amount of performance. And we believe that in a large-scale system, database is always a bottleneck. You can always do horizontal scaling on the application level, but when it comes to the database, it's just very difficult. So we want to make sure we utilize every single piece of performance that a server can offer. So we did not do virtualization for RDS. We apply database directly to a physical cluster. But of course, we have logical isolations between different database instances to make sure your data is secure.
Okay, great, thank you. And another question here from Alberto from Brisbane. Thank you, Alberto. Related to RDS, when will we see PolarDB generally available? It sounds promising.
Okay, so that actually I asked it in the first question. So we are looking at about 2 to 3 months' time.
Yeah.
We'll let you know once the PolarDB is available.
Okay, sure. Do you have to assign a RAM role to ECS for accessing RDS?
By default, no, you don't have to, but it's recommended you do that. So you do want to have different roles as different access privileges to different users. Yes.
Okay. All right. We've got a few more here. So, guys, if you do have any more questions, please drop them into the website now, and we'll try and get to them. So, last few: how to connect with on-premise SQL Server?
How to connect
to on-premise SQL Server?
If you're talking about migrating the on-premises SQL Server to RDS, we have a tool called DTS, Data Transfer Service. You can do one-off migration, or you can do continuous synchronization. So that's offered. I'm not exactly sure if that's what it means.
Yeah, that's all I've got here, so maybe that's answers the
Yeah,
question.
I think it's probably talking about the migration, not as the connection to on-premises.
Okay. If you'd like to learn more, if you've asked that question, please feel free to connect with us after to get more details on that one. And then last one is about an acronym. So what is TDE?
Okay, sorry, I didn't explain. TDE stands for Transparent Database Encryption. So basically, it's encryption at rest.
Okay, great. And then one here around a question about migration. Do Alibaba provide professional services to migrate existing Azure deployment scripts to Alibaba scripts?
Okay. We would prefer you leverage our professional partners to do migrations. But we do have a migration team for certain cases. It's really a case-by-case discussion. So feel free to drop us a message or something. We're happy to look at your scenario.
Okay, great. Thank you.